Welcome, everybody, back to the only podcast. And for the last time, I am your host, Chris Vanini. I'm joined by, as always, Austin Smith, my partner in this whole brigade. Austin, before we get into things, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right,
man. It's been a while since we did this.
I know. It's been, quite the summer since the last time we got on here. A somber note to start with your last podcast. I mean, come on, this is how many years now of you doing this, and this is you're signing off right before the transformative season here.
Yeah, so I don't want to make a whole big thing about me, but if you don't know, I have joined The Athletic as a national college football reporter for their site called The All-American, led by Stuart Mandel. We got a good team of reporters. It's a subscription news site. It's going to be a bunch of stories and stuff you're not getting anywhere else. And basically the whole media landscape is a mess right now in terms of people who actually want to make something out of it. So this is a new model, and I think it's so far the feedback and everything since we launched this week has been good. If you didn't know, had been with coachingsearch.com for the last 5 years. I ran the site for the last 3 years on my own and worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, kind of doing everything on my own there. And I this opportunity, when presented to me, I viewed as a big step up and basically a dream job. And so I took it. So as a result, I won't be able to do this podcast anymore, as it is a bit of a competing entity and stuff like that. And as the day we're recording this podcast, Wednesday, you guys won't hear this till at least Thursday, but I did have an MSU story on the site today. The site, if you don't know, it's theathletic.com/allamerican. And Nicole Auerbach from USA Today, or formerly of USA Today, and I teamed up to write a pretty long piece on everything that's kind of gone wrong for MSU football, why they fell so far so fast, and how they're trying to get back. I thought we had a lot of kind of touched every angle on it, and I think you guys should go read it for this specific audience. But Austin, in the meantime, you are still going to try to continue this podcast, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. As everybody surely knows, at this point, I had to step away as the co-manager. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be involved. Not for anything as glamorous as Chris's job, but I've got a new job as well, and just didn't have the time to dedicate to give the audience such a great and engaging SB Nation audience the effort that you guys deserve. So I know Kyle Thiel has done an awesome job so far, and I don't have any doubts that he's going to continue, him and the rest of the staff, Matt Hepner, Matt Sheehan, and all the rest, to keep Ryan O'Blennis, McLean Moberg. Those guys are going to keep putting out great work, and I'll just be here I'm kind of following in Chris's footsteps, taking a little step away from the writing and doing more of the podcast. We always had Chris, you and I always had such a good time doing this, even through I'm going to say thick and thin, but there was a lot more thin, I think, last year than the alternative.
MSU Sports took a dive once you and I started.
Oh, man, I know. I'm just hoping that I don't continue this whole thing on. So if things keep going poorly, I will do the Michigan State fan base a favor and just take a full step away, but and take the karma with me. But no, definitely plan to do this. And just real quick, I know you don't want to make this all about you, Chris, but I know I plan to subscribe to The Athletic. Chris, you guys, everybody who's read this site over the last handful of years, really since its inception, obviously, knows Chris is, the ultimate Spartan. The dude has put out fantastic work, and I think we should all do him a favor, follow him along. I mean, I'm sure this is the first in many awesome steps in your career, and just a sincere congratulations from the rest of the TOC team.
Well, I appreciate that. And, it was the TOC team that I've been very thankful for how that all kind of came together when I started. Basically, it starts with TOC, me getting to where I am now. Pete Rossman way back, asked me to write some football recruiting. I did, and then he had to step away and handed the site to me, and I joined the SB Nation news desk for a little bit. That SB Nation news desk bit led me to coaching, got me the coaching search job, which led to me eventually stepping away a bit in terms of the writing on the site, and I handed the keys off to Jared. I don't remember. We've handed the keys off to several people many times, but then I had to step away from the writing part basically after the Rose Bowl season, and focus everything on coaching search as I started to do that, run that thing by myself, but I was able to still do this podcast because I wanted an outlet to still talk about Michigan State sports because I feel like that's my strongest expertise, and I was thankful to everybody who had been running the site for giving me the opportunity to do that. And so I'll have to step away from that, but I'll still be doing it on Twitter at Chris Fanini, and you'll be able to. I'll still try to talk MSU there as much as I can. So I'm looking forward to whatever's the next step for this podcast. It's kind of weird. We're both doing the podcast for a site that neither of us actually really write for anymore, but yeah, that's fine. SB Nation provides us that sort of platform. TOC's got a great community that's been around for a long time. So hopefully this adds something to the site, and we convince you guys to go to the site and read the stuff that all the new guys are writing and everything. So let's talk some football. Is there anything else, housekeeping, we needed to touch on? Because no one's here to listen to that.
I think we're ready, man. I think after all of this time and all of the stuff that's happened, I think it's time we talk some actual football.
Okay, so everybody's football's back. It was obviously a mess of an offseason for MSU. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Again, read my story on The Athletic about it for more on that. But as we look forward now to 2017, it would not be unreasonable to say that your excitement for the season is diminished a bit once that depth chart was released earlier this week. And you notice just kind of how young and inexperienced, and in some places where there are holes, the situation the roster is in. To me, it kind of looks like a John L. Smith era roster, but that's kind of the position the team is right now, coming off at 3-9. I think you're hoping for 6-6. So, I mean, when we look at the depth chart, what first jumped out to you?
Do you want to say? Okay,
you can start with the good. You can start with the good if we don't want to.
Yeah,
keep everybody.
In terms of the good, I mean, personally, I think that this offense has a real chance to surprise some people. There are valid concerns up and down both sides of the ball. I think the thing that you touched on is really the theme of this entire roster is just young. And it's crazy that last year this team was also young and inexperienced. And despite playing so many young players, this team is somehow even less experienced than it was a year ago after everything that's happened this past offseason.
Basically all the seniors on the team were the ones who put up the stats. Like Phil Steele, I think, has MSU as the second least experienced team in the country, I think, just barely ahead of Michigan.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of what it is. They lost. They didn't lose a lot of guys, but the guys they lost did just about everything. And then, the guys who, were kicked off the team for.
Yeah, but really, I mean, if you look at this depth chart, both sides of the ball, you're talking about a very real possibility that for the entire season you get in any given game no more than 3 seniors start, and maybe 5 are even regulars in the playing rotation. Maybe more.
The only seniors on starting: center Brian Allen,
Chris Fry,
linebacker Chris Fry, and that's it.
That's it. And then you've got
and then Gerald Holmes technically if he starts.
Yeah. So, but if you break it down into who might even play, you're talking probably Gerald Holmes will definitely play. Obviously, he might not. I'll bet he starts a handful of games, be it right or wrong. He'll start a handful of games. Demetrius Cooper, I think, will ultimately end up starting at defensive end. He had a little bit of he spit on a pace officer this offseason. So
and then violated his probation when an obscure Twitter account tweeted video of him possessing alcohol at the East Lansing Police Department, and the most college football thing ever.
The most modern day college football thing ever, because a social media, like another fan account, like reported him to the police. Yeah, it was unbelievable. But either way, I have a feeling his talent, will kind of win out over the other defensive ends, and he'll end up playing a decent amount. Shane Jones will play at linebacker. But really, it's crazy just how inexperienced this team is. That being said, like I said, I really think this offense, if you look at the talent that's on this offense, there's no shortage of it. There really isn't. I think, you lost a lot of really solid players. I mean, it's never easy to replace a guy like R.J. Shelton. Josiah Price is one of the more prolific tight ends in MSU history. You lost some playmakers, but, at the skill position especially, you got some athletes. I mean, Felton Davis has performed when he's played. Tristan Jackson, by all accounts, is a playmaker. Cam Chambers was a huge recruit. And I think a sneaky storyline here that I haven't really heard anybody talk about it, but I think this is the most athletic group of tight ends that D'Antonio's ever had. And if you look at the lineage of tight ends, Charlie Gant, Brian Linthicum, Deion Sims, Josiah Price.
That 2009 tight end class was nuts.
I mean, it's crazy. And you're talking about Matt Sokol, Noah Davis, and Matt Dotson. Those are some guys. Just listen to the measurables alone. 6'6", 250, 6'4", 248, 6'5", 234. I mean, those are some physical specimens.
And Sokol was a quarterback, wasn't he?
Yeah, Sokol, by all reports, has been just like a bomb waiting to blow up. Like, this dude is ready to break out. And I think this season, listen, I was a huge Josiah Price fan. If you're a Spartan, you owe him a lot, because he's one of the more prolific tight ends to ever come through the doors. But he didn't bring, and neither really did Jamal Lyles, bring that athletic, explosive, stretch the seam type of player that really only Brian Linthicum has ever brought to Michigan State. And I think you got a couple, maybe even three guys that can sort of bring that to the table. And that's going to help with a young quarterback like Brian Lewerke playing. So I'm a little higher on the offense probably than most people, but there are a lot of weak spots too.
On the tight end spot, I think it'll be very interesting to see how, if they're going to play, they have to be able to run block. And
absolutely.
There have been talented MSU pass catching tight ends who have not played as much as maybe we felt they should, because they were not good enough in the run blocking game. But so let's talk about that. The offensive line. I think this is actually a pretty solid line. Cole Chewins and Tyler Higbee showed a lot of upside as freshmen last year. So they're another year in. They're bigger. They'll continue to grow and get better. Brian Allen's great at center. David Beadle was a mess at left tackle, but he never
should have played there.
He was never a tackle in the first place. He's much better at guard. It's a more comfortable position, and he's there. And then redshirt freshman Luke Campbell at right tackle. And the coaches have absolutely raved about this guy. They said back in the spring he was going to be the starting right tackle. And usually when this staff kind of goes all in on a guy like that, they're usually right. They said the same. They gave the same type of hype to guys like Darqueze Dennard and Shilique Calhoun, and they don't do it for anybody. And when these guys talk up a guy, they're usually right. So the fact that Campbell was able to impress so much that they were all in on him taking the job, I think bodes well. I'm sure he'll have his struggles. It's his first time playing college football on the field in games, but I think that's a positive sign for the future on the offensive line, which was a mess the last couple of years with injuries and young guys, and there's not a lot of depth on this line.
That's the problem.
You've got the backups. You've got Dennis Finley, who's a senior but has never really come back from his broken leg a few years ago. Chase Giancaco's a junior who's barely played much. Then Matt Allen, a redshirt freshman. Kevin Jarvis, a true freshman. Jordan Reed, a true freshman. There's no depth here. That's the problem. If any of these guys go down, they're in trouble. But this is a line where you're going to have a lot of these guys, other than Allen. You're going to have a lot of these guys for a number of years. So in a couple of years, this offensive line should maybe be back to what it was in the 2013, 2014 days.
Yeah, and, you're talking about the coaches raving about Luke Campbell. You heard Mark Staten, a guy who's coached some pretty darn good offensive linemen, say that Campbell, and he said it so nonchalantly in one of these pressers, that he's a 4-year starter. I mean, that is serious coming from a coach. And again, like you said, that's spring, early summer. But, they've talked a lot about him, but the guy who from signing day, from the first time Mark D'Antonio was ever able to talk about him, they've been gushing about is Kevin Jarvis. I think David Beadle's the starter. I actually think he's finally found a home at right guard. I think it's where he's meant to be. He's a road grader. He's not a pass protector. Put him in at guard, he's going to be great, or at least solid. I think Kevin Jarvis is going to push him for playing time. This kid is, if you watch his high school tape, he is every bit of 6'4", 312. Physically, he's ready to play. And, like you said, there's not a lot of depth here, and there's certainly no tested depth. So it's going to be who steps up to the plate. And I think from what you've heard, Jarvis is one of those guys that's going to be ready to go. I personally would be shocked if he redshirts. I think he's a part of the playing group. Maybe he's, MSU, first of all, loves to rotate offensive linemen anyway, whether they should or not.
This is one of those years where they shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. But I think
if they can.
I think he still might be your sixth or your seventh offensive lineman. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a lot of Matt Allen at center and more of Brian Allen shifting over to guard too a little bit. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, maybe Brian does the Jack Allen trick of playing every spot on the line, basically.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, you also saw down the stretch last year. Just one last thing on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Down the stretch against Michigan and Ohio State especially, and then obviously against Rutgers, the offensive line, as soon as Chewins and Higbee, before Higbee got hurt, started to play consistently on that left side, that's when Michigan State's running game and their offense actually looked functional and competent.
Mm-hmm. The Michigan game, the Ohio State game, the Rutgers game.
Yep.
Toward the end of the year, there were some bright spots.
And so, roll that forward a year further. If Beadle and Campbell can literally play, if they can just play up to the level that Chewins and Higbee played to last year, all of a sudden you're talking about a pretty solid offensive line, theoretically a quarterback who just needs to be average.
Well, let's get into quarterback right now.
Okay.
I was pretty high on Lewerke based on what we saw last year, and I thought of everything that happened last year. I think his injury against Michigan was one of the most brutal things to happen to the team on the field, because that was working toward the future. As soon as that happened, the season was completely lost because you were suddenly working with a quarterback who was no longer going to be there in a season that was already down the toilet. But Lewerke's completion percentage wasn't great at times, but he has very good poise and a feel for things. He rarely looks flustered in the pocket, and he can move well enough to make things happen. Now he's got to do a better job of making reads down the field. He's missed open guys at times, but I think he's got a lot of those intangibles. And he was a guy, they named him the starter in spring and said he's our guy, we're going forward. There was no battle with Damian Terry, who's a senior and was supposed to be the star years ago, and no battle with Messiah DeWeaver, who was a touted freshman. They're all in on Lewerke too, and this is the same head coach who went back and forth between Kirk Cousins and Keith Nichol forever. So the fact that they've settled on him, maybe it says something about the guys behind him, but I think it does say something about what they think of Lewerke, who, again, was a redshirt freshman last year, and it was his first time in the mix with a lot of stuff. And I like, he may not be a big, well, I was going to say kind of reminds me of a Brian Hoyer type, but then I was going to say maybe not a big NFL guy, but Hoyer's still in the NFL, so I guess that counts for something. What do you think about him?
I mean, I think you hit on a couple really key points. The first is that, last year in his limited amount of time on the field, well, first of all, his injury, I think, was maybe in terms of on the field, probably the low light of the entire season for the reason that you stated, because he looked like he belonged when he was out there. He didn't. I mean, he looked like a freshman at times, and he looked like a guy who did not trust the offensive line in front of him for good reason. But in terms of his poise in the pocket, his ability to run and know when to run was really impressive to me.
They start.
Athletic than he looks.
Yeah, I'm sorry I keep talking over you. It's been a while since we did this. I know I do that all the time.
It's all good.
He didn't start that Michigan game, right? That was O'Connor who started. And then Lewerke came in to move late and moved him down the field a bit and then got hurt.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, from what I remember anyways. And he just looks like he belongs. I mean, I think the good thing, obviously the injury is, there's no real good way to spin it, but he was healthy for spring. So he has had an entire offseason to be the guy. And I think them committing to him is going to really give him, a big advantage just mentally moving into the season, where he knows he's the guy. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder. I mean, even the way Tyler O'Connor did last year. And like you said, this is coming from a coach who, went between Connor Cook and Andrew Maxwell for a little while, went between Nickel and Cousins for
went between Lewerke and O'Connor.
Better part of a season. So I think it says more about Lewerke than it does the guys behind him, I think. And I think it says a lot about what his teammates think of him. I think it's a smart move by D'Antonio, not only because he just seems like the best fit talent-wise, but also to put a figurehead and put a leader in place for this offense and this program that is desperately in need of one. And I really do think for this offense to be – all he has to do is be average for this offense to be good, provided the offensive line is good. He's got plenty of weapons around him, and he's got the backfield is loaded just as it was the last 2 years. So that, to spin it back a little bit, the reason why that offensive line, if that offensive line is a plus or even average to above average, that is going to make Brian Lewerke look so good, because he's going to be able to turn around and hand that ball off 30 times a game to the likes of LJ Scott, Gerald Holmes, and Madre London. And that's just going to take a lot of pressure off him. And he's got those athletic tight ends too. He's got some capable, fun and big wide receivers. Like, you can see where, if things come together the right way, this is better than a functional offense. Now you could say so many other things too, because if one of these offensive linemen goes down, throw everything out the window. If Scott and Holmes get hurt, who knows? If one of these wide receivers goes down, you're just very thin on offense. But if they can avoid major injuries at major positions and just execute, it should be an offense that should be able to get you back to a bowl game, if not do even a little better. And it's a young offense, so moving forward, I just think there's a lot to be excited about.
And one thing on Lewerke, I'd be very curious to see what type of how they use him. He was so much better last year, based on the eye test. I don't have the numbers on me, but he seemed so much better when they get him outside the pocket. Mm-hmm. When they run play action, bootleg, get him out, give him the option to run, give him only half the field that he has to read. I thought that was a lot better than the standard drop back and throw from there. So I'm curious how they're going to use him, because that was one way he seemed to be a lot more effective when they did it. And so that takes us over to the running backs. It's the three we know: LJ Scott, Gerald Holmes, Madre London for the third year in a row. Scott's a junior, Holmes is a senior, London's a junior. I feel like it's something we said every week last year, but I think it's got to be mostly LJ Scott with a little Gerald Holmes mixed in. They always say they're going to go hot hand. They never go hot hand. We bring this up every week. So who knows if they'll do it or not. I feel like it's the same story we've been saying forever on the running backs. But those are, between Scott and Holmes, are two very talented backs. Their yards per carry number weren't great last year, but they didn't have much blocking to go with them. But Scott's just a guy who can really make a lot. I mean, both guys can have the ability to make something out of nothing. They don't have game-breaking speed, but Holmes is very powerful, and Scott is incredibly shifty and has great feet. He just fumbles the ball a bit too much. But there is plenty of talent in the backfield. Yeah. And if they're going to have to rely on these guys, since we'll get to the receivers in a minute, but it's going to have to come from the running back.
To me, LJ Scott is I think he should be the second best running back in the entire conference behind only Saquon Barkley. And there are some good running backs in this conference. Justin Jackson at Northwestern's good. Mikey Weber at Ohio State's a dang good running back. Michigan's got some guys. I mean, and I know I'm forgetting more too, but LJ Scott's got it all. We've seen it. We've seen it many, many, many times throughout his first 2 years. It's just the frustrations about the other, the necessary parts of his game that he just doesn't, that just hasn't, it's shown his youth a little bit, fumbles the ball too much. The biggest complaint against him last year was his lack of ability to pass block. And, for better or worse, the coaches are going to hold him out when he doesn't execute those things. So I like to think that, another season of being able to mature, maybe having some of those not great influences not being around anymore will help. But to me, this is a guy who needs the ball 25 times a game. You saw it when he got the ball last year. He produced game in and game out. And another offseason, I know he was nicked up a bit, so he probably didn't have 100% healthy offseason, but another offseason in the playbook, another offseason getting into even better shape. I mean, you saw a huge leap in his physical stature from freshman to sophomore year. If he's even close to going like that from sophomore to junior, you're talking about an all-conference level performer, so long as he wants to be. So, I mean, if that offensive line can give him holes, I mean, he should be running for, 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. I don't even think that should be a challenge for him, just provided he's up to it and gets the ball the amount that his talent demands.
Yeah, he's an NFL quality in terms of talent back, and he may leave, even without a big year, he may leave for the NFL after this year, because when you're a running back and you take a pounding, and he's taken a pounding for 2 years, you only got so many reps in you. Sometimes guys decide to go no matter where they're protected or not. So this may be the last year of LJ Scott. We'll see how things go. So that takes us to the big question mark on the offense. So that's the wide receivers. Listed starters: sophomore Tristan Jackson, sophomore Darrell Stewart, junior Felton Davis. Obviously, Donnie Corley was supposed to be the receiver of the future, but his involvement in the sexual assault situation got him booted from the team. But Tristan Jackson showed some promise at times, I think. Stewart a little bit in the spring game. Felton Davis was a guy 2 years ago people thought would turn into something, and hasn't so far. So a lot of question marks. What do you think about the receivers?
I think there's a ton of talent. Up and down. You've seen it. Tristan Jackson is a fluid athlete, man. I think he has a very good chance to be the leading receiver on this team. Felton Davis is that big body. I think
6'4", 195.
Yeah, he should be a red zone target. I honestly think having Medeiros in front of him, and honestly Josiah Price in the red zone, kind of sapped his value a little bit. That's one of those guys you wish you could go back and redshirt, because he really could use that extra year. But Darrell Stewart, I don't really know what to make of Darrell Stewart personally. Every time he gets on the field, I feel like he drops the ball. So I'm hoping that he can step up. But these guys are really solid. But what excites me, they all excite me. I think they could all have really good years, especially Jackson. The guys behind them are the ones that excite me.
Well, this is what I was going to say. This is what I was going to say next. These are all the backup receivers listed on the depth chart. Redshirt freshman Cam Chambers, true freshman Hunter Rison, true freshman Lorest Nelson, true freshman Cody White.
Yeah,
It's all freshmen behind
all young.
sophomores. It's all freshmen behind all sophomores and a junior.
But it's completely up for grabs. In a way, it's a beautiful thing because if you're not playing, your status, your class is not going to keep you on the field. It's not like you got a bunch of seniors like Medeiros where it's okay, he's a senior, he's going to play whether he's the best player or not. He may have been last year, but there's no hierarchy here. And you've got some explosive kids coming in. Go back and watch the high school tape of Cam Chambers, Hunter Rison, even Loress Nelson, and Cody White. You're talking about game breakers. I mean, these are some guys. Cam Chambers is built like a ton of bricks.
He is 6'2", 211.
And chiseled. There's not an ounce of fat on this kid's body. I think he is going to have – I'm more excited about him than anybody else on this team. Hunter Rison, he's a little more slight of frame, but if you talk about a slot receiver with a good pedigree, doesn't get much better than Bad Moon's son. So I'm excited to see him out there. Cody White, his team made it really far in the playoffs, if not won last year, and he played a little bit of quarterback, some wide receiver. And if you watch him take off down the field, he is just dusting kids. And I know it's high school, so there's only so much you can say. He is an athlete. I mean, it's really similar in a lot of ways to that group that was around during the Rose Bowl. It reminds me of that, the Mumphrey, Burbridge, Lippett kind of group. Mm-hmm. But I'm afraid that this is the 2012 iteration and not the 20.
Right. Everybody forgets. Everybody wanted the receivers coach fired in 2012 because all these guys lost it. And you know what? They're all in the NFL now.
Look at that group now. Mumphrey, Burbridge, Benny Fowler, Tony Lippett. You had some.
Mumphrey. Mumphrey got cut because he was also in
right.
State.
Right, but those are NFL guys. These are playmakers.
But they all made the NFL.
They all starred at Michigan State at one point or another. And I think this group, in terms of sheer talent, I could see them being right up there. It's just a matter of whether they're ready to go. So it's all a learning process. The good news is that a lot of them practiced with Brian Lewerke last year.
Not the true freshmen.
Not the true freshmen, but the starters on the second team last year. So we'll see. I think there's a ton of talent. Again, and this is the theme with this team. It's if things break the right way and they're ready for the bright lights. The thing that's exciting about this team is that, with the exception really of just Brian Allen on the offense and maybe LJ Scott, all these guys are coming back. So this could be
for at least 2 years.
Right. So you're approaching this year as the year before the years, plural. So it's going to be exciting. I think people just need to go into it, got to be patient and just think about the fact that it can't really get any worse than last year. So I'm excited. Overall, this offense really does. It's going to be fun to watch them evolve, I think.
It's not deep, but there is talent there. Whether or not they can get all of it, we'll see. And a factor is going to be Dave Warner's play calling. Did not make any coaching changes after the year, which really surprised me because he's
surprised a lot of people.
He's made changes when they've had bad years. They moved Mark Snyder to defensive ends to make 2 line coaches, but I was very surprised by that because there were a lot of problems last year, and a lot of that was on the coaches.
I think this is his make or break year. I don't think there's any question about it. There's been heat on his seat every year since. I think even the people were questioning him during the year they made the college football playoffs. So this is, you're a couple years in here of people really wondering what's going on. So if he's in a tough spot because he's got a really young team and a lot of youth to work with here. But if things crumble and it's a lot of play calling related issues, I wouldn't, a change wouldn't shock anyone, I don't think.
When given the talent, when given the 2013 offense, the 2014 offense, Dave Warner made a lot of that 2014 offense broke all the school records. Yep. But he hasn't been able to turn chicken crap into chicken salad, and he may have a bit of chicken crap this year. So we'll see. The other part of having so many young guys is I'm very curious where any sort of leadership will come from. That was a big problem last year, as we all know, and as is documented in that story I worked on The Athletic. Lewerke's got to be the guy. I mean, Brian Allen's a guy, obviously. senior offensive line center. It's a leadership job, but Lewerke's has to be a guy, because other than Gerald Holmes is too. It was surprising he wasn't voted a captain, but everybody's going to look to the quarterback.
Yep.
It's got to be there, especially for the receivers who don't have anybody, have no seniors in their group to point to. So that will be, I think, an important thing. So now we turn over to the defense, and this is it ain't looking great. Let's start with the line. The line has been decimated with losses the past few years. They lost 7 guys after the 2015 season. You had 4 or 5 guys graduate, and then you had 2 or 3 more booted off the team or leaving the team for, whether it was marijuana or academics or whatever. Give me your thoughts on this defensive line, because MSU went from 37 sacks in 2015 to 11 last year. Unbelievable. Yeah. And this defense does not work if they cannot pressure the quarterback and stop the run. And that all starts with the line. So are they going to be able to do that?
It's anybody's guess. They're going to have to get creative in terms of creating pressure.
They're going to have to play 13 guys on defense at a time.
13, 14, wherever. You can play as many as you want. I'm not going to object. I'll start with the positive. Up the middle, I actually think they're going to be just fine. I think Panashuk and Raequan Williams flashed a lot last year, especially down the stretch when they got comfortable.
As freshmen now, they're both sophomores.
Right. So I'm excited about both of them. I think in terms of run stopping, you're not going to want to run up the middle. These are some mean dudes. And then behind them, Naquan Jones, had he been healthy last year, he was a higher-ranked recruit, I'm pretty sure, than most of these other defensive linemen that they got in the last few classes. He was a top 150 kid, big player, I believe, from the state of Illinois. He's a dude. He's a player. And so
6'4", 328.
Yeah, redshirt freshman. I mean, that's a big fella. So between those 3, I think you've got a lot of top-line talent in the middle. Then you've got guys like Keontae Stallworth, who was a big recruit, Gerald Owens, who's flirted with playing time, Devin Salmon.
Gerald Owens used to be
he was a running back once upon.
Yeah, he was a running back. Now he's up to 312 pounds.
It's going to be interesting. I think up the middle, it's like I said, I'm excited to see these guys play. These are building blocks for the future of that defensive line. And I think you've got some functional depth, maybe even some plus depth with Naquan Jones. It's going to be interesting. But, boy, you get to those defensive ends, and that is just not what you want to see even at a D1 program that prides itself on defensive ends. It's funny. A buddy of mine said to me the other day, why – well, first he said, what are Dylan Alexander and Kenny Willekes? Like, what are they? Who are they? Where are they from? He didn't know who these people were. And the other thing, he elaborated on that and said, why can't we recruit defensive ends anymore? And I said, take a step back and look at the players that have been kicked off or have transferred from this roster in the last 2 years, and you'll realize that it's not a recruiting issue. It's not an issue of getting talent in. It's an issue of keeping it around. I mean, go all the way back to Montez Sweat, Knox Smith. I mean,
Craig Evans.
Oh, I'm still sad about Craig Evans. He was my favorite player. All these defensive ends from a year ago. I mean, a lot of positions have been decimated. A lot of talent has left this team, but nowhere does it show up like defensive end. I do think Demetrius Cooper ends up being a starter before long. Honestly, a lot of good things have been said about Kenny Willekes and Dylan Alexander. Actually, last year, Dylan Alexander played fairly well down the stretch.
He did.
But man,
relying on starting to be a starter.
6'4", 244 and 6'4", 247 is not what you like to see out of your defensive ends in terms of size. So the Robert Bowers hopefully can bring something to the table. I bet Jacob Panashuk, Mike's little brother, is probably going to play. It's going to be all hands on deck creating the pass rush. Brandon Randall isn't listed as a defensive end, but I know he's been flirting between end and star. And that kid's 6'2", 231. Yes, he's athletic off the edge, but that just shows you the type of desperation that the coaches are already feeling, the experiments they're already conducting to prepare for what could happen. So the ends scare the daylights out of me, but this defense, in order to create a pass rush, they're going to have to get creative. There's really no other choice. I think you'll see a lot of blitzing, and you just got to hope that teams don't dink and dunk you to death, and you can tackle the guys in front of you. So, it's those ends. That's the position more than any other on the roster that puts a ceiling on this team.
And those ends are not flanked by big linebackers.
Nope, not at all. Not a lot of size up and down this entire outside of the defensive tackles. Not much size on this.
Andrew Dowell, 6'1", 222 is your star linebacker. And then Chris Fry, 6'2", 238. He's not a big guy, but he's the biggest guy they got.
That's crazy.
He's the Sam linebacker, and then Joe Bocce ball at middle. 6'2", 233. So this is going to be a defense that, if they're up against a power running type of team, I think are going to struggle.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I do think the talent,
and that's where this defense always starts. Like, as bad as the secondary has been, they at least at times were able to stop the run. That's what Narduzzi always said. Even when they give up a bunch of passing yards, he'd say, but we stop the run. That's what we want to do first. And they couldn't last year, and it's going to be difficult too this year. Yeah,
I agree with you. The linebackers, to me, they're not the biggest, but I will say, in terms of strict talent, I think this is right up there with the most talented position groups on the entire team, outside of maybe running back. Bocce's a player. He took that Mike job. Frey never even, a lot of people talked about Chris Fry moving into the middle, but they never even flirted with that this offseason. Shane Jones, they moved back to the outside. Byron Bulla got some playing time last year, but even he couldn't beat him out. There's no or next to his name. I think Bocce's a player. Dowell's the type of guy that a modern college defense needs, and frankly, I think this one in particular is really going to benefit from, because of, again, he's not the biggest guy. He's not gonna be your run thumper, your Max Bulla, or even your Darian Harris, but that dude's fast. That guy can cover he can cover tight ends. He can even flirt with covering wide receivers coming over the middle, and he can fly off the edge. He was my breakout pick last year, and with that defensive line in front of him, he just didn't quite get there. But hopefully these tackles can keep some more guys off of him, and we can really see that athletic potential. And then there's Fry. I mean, I've never thought Chris Fry I don't think he's ever been the most talented guy on the field, but he plays like his hair is on fire, and that dude is a tone setter. And
even when he gets targeted.
Well, yes, he loves targeting people. But
no. I mean, when he gets targeted, he got lit up in the Michigan game.
Yes. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. But he's going to have to be. You talk about leadership. He's one of only two captains. He's going to have to be the heart and soul. I will say, I think. And the the depth behind them. Shane Jones is one of the few experienced players on this team. I like Byron Bulla. Brandon Randall's going to play. None of the freshmen on here would surprise me if they play. Basically, Antoine Simmons was a 4-star recruit out of Ann Arbor, a linebacker who actually played some running back in high school too, and was recruited for that. I think he's going to get some playing time. I like the linebackers. It's just a matter of whether they can keep the offensive linemen off of them.
It's an athletic group. It's
very athletic.
It's not a big run stopping group.
Nope, not many tackles in there.
On the topic of Fry, I mean, he did far and away win as a captain, but I'm going to be very curious because of Riley Bulla was at times it sounded like in some circles, some whispers, sometimes a divisive figure because he was a big Donald Trump guy, and that just rubs some people the wrong way. And we talked for our article on The Athletic, we talked to Darian Harris about it. He downplayed the racial tensions on the team, and Chris Fry was pretty adamant in defending Bulla at Big Ten Media Days, and then after that kind of didn't really want to talk about it anymore. But, that goes back to what I was saying before, some of the leadership problems that they had in the past, and I'm very curious if they will be able to get back on the same page this time around, because Fry's the only senior starter on the defense, so everybody's going to be turning to him. So that takes us to the defensive backs, which A lot of the same feelings about the defensive line I think we have about the defensive backs. Not that either of those two positions are important, right?
Right. No, of course not. Who covers or needs to rush the passer?
This is a unit that was much maligned because of how much the defensive system relies on them to play one-on-one coverage. MSU had a bunch of guys who could not play one-on-one coverage, and I was wrong on this podcast when I said Monte Nicholson would not get drafted. He got drafted.
Yeah,
was it like the 4th round?
Oh yeah, he got overpicked. Well, he looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. He is the ultimate example of that, and it's fun.
He was an incredibly athletic dude who did track, but man, he could not read an angle to save his life.
Oh my gosh!
But he has like I said, has incredible athletic ability, and the NFL clearly like that. Now he will get replaced by guys who are not as athletic and guys who had bright spots at times, but mostly haven't. Justin Lane, who was going to be a wide receiver, ended up playing defensive back and handling himself all right as a freshman. Josh Butler, kind of the same thing. People thought Josiah Scott, the true freshman, would take that one corner job, but it looks like Butler has him beat for now. And then the safeties, Kari Willis, a guy who's been in and out, depending on if Nicholson and Demetrius Cox were benched or not. Now he's the guy, with Grayson Miller behind him, and then Matt Morrissey, guy who at times played good last year, but at times got overpowered as a 6'3", 208-pound guy, safety. What do you think of the
DBs? The biggest problem with this defense, I'm half of me is tempted. Okay, I got to take a step back. The backbone of this defense is all up the middle. It's defensive tackles, those middle linebackers, and the safeties. The safeties are the drivers of this whole defense. If you go back through Michigan State's entire defensive history under Narduzzi and D'Antonio, when the safeties are good, generally speaking, the defense is good. Now, that's always aligned with more talent than this team probably has in the front seven, but still. Last year, the safeties were terrible, just terrible. Despite being huge recruits, both of them at their own point in time were the #1 recruits in the state of Pennsylvania. I know Monte Nicholson was an all Big Ten first team, like all freshman player, but man, they were just terrible last year. Just awful miscommunication. Like you said, Monte Nicholson and could never take the right line to the ball in run support or in pass defense. And it just wasn't good. And so that being said, yes, these guys that are coming in, Kari Willis, Matt Morrissey, Grayson Miller, these guys are not the athletes that those guys were. They're not. End of story. There's no sugarcoating it. But what I will say is that they just have to play competently. These guys don't have to be superstars to make this defense work. They're going to get burnt. It's not if the defensive line can't get pressure, it's going to ruin everything for the secondary. But all these guys, not to give you a plus defense or anything, but just to not have the multiple huge over-the-top plays, the massive runs that got ripped off because Nicholson or Cox couldn't make a play in the run game. These guys just have to be smart, and they just have to execute, and you won't have nearly as many breaks.
They have to be smarter than guys in the past, but the way the defense is set up puts so much on those guys.
Absolutely,
they have to read so many plays, so many keys, and the defense, especially the safeties, it puts so much on those guys.
Yep.
And that's why guys like Curtis Drummond and Isaiah Lewis maybe didn't get as much love as they deserved compared to the Darqueze Dennards and Trey Waynes. But the safeties drive everything on that defense. And unless they've tweaked things, because this defense has been figured out, like if people know how to do it now, and when you don't have the NFL or all Big Ten quality defensive backs, you get shredded. And I'm curious what tweaks they're going to make, because you're going to put in you got basically starters across the board almost in the defensive backfield, and If these guys have to all be on the same page at all times on every single play, or otherwise a guy is going to be completely wide open. That's just the way they run this defense. So I'm curious what kinds of tweaks they're going to make, because they have to change the style of defense they play.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think one of the things that, they don't have a ton of playing time, but this is one of the only experienced, in terms of talking safeties, it's one of the only playing groups where you're starting multiple upperclassmen.
Morrissey's a junior, Willis is a junior, the two safeties.
Grayson Miller is a junior. David Dowell's a redshirt sophomore behind them. So that'll be interesting. I do want to take a mini deep dive into the safeties just for a quick second. Trey Person and Dominique Long, those kids that are buried down there on the third string of the depth chart, are exciting players. Especially
you're big on a lot of these true freshmen.
Oh man, dude, I get deep when I read and I trust the evaluation of these coaches, because the problem with these teams has not been that they haven't been bringing in talent. The problem has been that they can't keep them around. You know what I mean? So Dom Long, this kid's an athlete. I believe he's a track runner and like a full track and field, long jump, all that stuff at a school in Ohio. And he's exciting. I don't know if he'll get on the field this year with, multiple upperclassmen in front of him, but that's just a name to watch later. And then Trey Person was a 2-star. I'm actually surprised he's playing safety. I thought he was going to be a corner. But he was a 2-star, one of those late recruits that kind of came out of left field. He's another fun kid to watch. Another plus athlete, one of those, I believe he's from Georgia, and was kind of like a weird Mumphrey Darquez Denardish story where he was plucked out of nowhere, had barely any offers, and MSU saw him, offered him, and now he's a Spartan. So
he's 5'10", 165.
He's not a big fella. That's why I thought he'd be a corner and not a safety.
Right, that's a really small safety.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see him on there. But safety, listen, just execute. Don't allow the huge errors, and you might be okay. I think having juniors there will be helpful. Now, corner, let's just switch over to corner. This position, I have no idea what to expect. I think Justin Lane was a plus player at corner last year. After getting switched over in the middle of the year. He's one of the only guys that looks the part. 6'3", 180, long arms. I think he has long-term has a really high ceiling there. Josh Butler, no clue what to expect. Josiah Scott got a ton of praise. No clue what to expect. TJ Harrell is on his 7th position, it seems like. He's been a running back, a linebacker. I think he was a safety for a little bit. So, again, no idea what to expect. And then on the other side, Tyson Smith had a stroke last year. The fact that he's even on the playing field is incredible. So I think you'll see some names that are not on this initial depth chart end up playing, namely, again, another true freshman. I bet you Emmanuel Flowers ends up playing. He's a 3-star kid from California. He's one of the only dudes that, again, is going to look the part. He's tall, long arms. Corner scares the hell out of me. And that's why this defense in general, I don't think it's fair to expect anything more than maybe slightly below average, because defensive end and corner, arguably the two most important position groups on the entire defense. Actually, almost definitely that.
Whenever MSU's been good on D, it's because they've had elite defensive corners.
I think they're going to be okay up the middle. I think, the backbone of the defense should be solid.
MSU just needs to hope the game is completely played within the hash marks. And
the edges are leave a lot to be desired. So I think we talked about the offense potentially being a plus unit. If Michigan State wants to get over, 6 wins, or 2-6 wins, they're going to need this offense to be able to carry some of the load, a lot of the load.
Yeah, so that's a breakdown of the roster. Oh, well, I guess special teams wise, I can't say I know much of anything about Matt Coughlin kicking and Brett Scanlon kicking off, and we know Jake Hardbarker is an okay punter, and then Darrell Stewart's the returner, and that's a place I think he could do well at, because he does have that.
Him, and then Laress Nelson and Cody White. The fact that they're in there as true freshmen means they're gonna. I wouldn't be surprised if either of them get some some opportunities to.
And special teams has been brutal for MSU. That has
Terrible
been an
for the last
absolute weak
handful of
spot
years.
the last few years. After it was a major strength, so that's where that is. So let's go down the schedule here. Let's predict wins, losses, see where they are. I guess we'll just go one by one. Bowling Green, they open up Saturday at noon on, I assume. Oh no, it's on ESPNU. It's not on BTN, folks.
It's on ESPNU. Oh
yes.
man.
Bowling Green. What's your pick?
I'm gonna say
just a win, just win-loss. We don't need a score.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's a win. I think this team's got a lot of pent-up energy, and yeah, they're young, but I have a hard time seeing them coming out and losing this first game after the crazy type of adversity they've gone through.
I think they win. Bowling Green was terrible last year, except for Bowling Green did win their last 3 games, so who knows if that carries over. Then home game, 3:30, Western Michigan. A team that went to the Cotton Bowl last
year. You're putting me on the spot here. I'm going to say that's a win, but I think this is closer to a 50-50 than I would like to believe.
Yeah.
They lost a lot of talent. I mean, they lost the type of talent does not come through.
Right. They lost their top 5 pick receiver Anthony Davis. They lost their all-MAC quarterback Zach Terrell. They do have a lot back. Otherwise, they overall were a young team, but they lose their all-stars basically. Yep. So, and they have a new staff. That will be an adjustment.
Yeah, there's a lot of change there. I don't think.
I think they win, but I think it'll be a close one.
So do I.
Home against Notre Dame.
I think they're
night.
Yeah, I think Michigan State loses this one.
Oh, I forgot. How much do you think the white helmets will factor into the Western game?
I think they're going to look tight. I'm into it. I love the look. The all white. I've been personally, and my internet receipts will show this, I have been pining for an all white Stormtrooper look for years. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, a 3:30 game against Western Michigan is a strange time, but I think they're doing the whiteout. They're doing a whiteout that game because then they're going to do a stripe out for
next game. Notre Dame, I think MSU loses. I think right now there's just too much talent on Notre Dame's team, even though it's at home. I'm sure they're going to be spirited, but that's even with a new quarterback, that's a tough ask.
I say the same thing. I say they lose. Next, home against Iowa.
Oh boy. I'm going to say a win, but I'm very, very 50-50 on this one because Iowa's going to play a rough and tumble.
Iowa's got about 50 running backs and no receivers.
Yeah, so that's not a good matchup offensively for MSU, but
I don't think there is a good matchup for MSU.
That's a great point. So I'll stick with I'll stick with a win. I don't feel good about that one though.
Say win. I will say loss.
Yeah.
At Michigan.
Ugh.
Who only returns 5 starters, but they obviously have a lot of talent.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say that I think if Michigan State was going to beat Michigan this season, it's getting them at this point in the schedule because they're still going to be young. I think they're not going to have everything figured out yet. But they run it right down your throat, and I'm going to say that MSU loses, unfortunately, but I could see that one going the other way too.
I say they lose somewhat handily. First road game, young team.
Yeah.
Next game, at Minnesota.
What do I have us at right now? 3-2?
I'm at 3-2.
I think MSU can win that game. I think they can bounce back from losing to Michigan on the road and win that game. Minnesota, PJ Fleck is a machine, but I feel like they lost a lot from last year, and that's a lot of overhauls. So I'm going to say that MSU gets that one.
I agree. I say they win at Minnesota. The one spot where Minnesota is very thin is at the offensive line. There were times in camp where they only had 4 guys due to injuries to other. They had a lot of injuries, so that's a spot where MSU would struggle, I think, but could do okay. So I say they win at Minnesota. So I've met 3-3. You have met 4-2. No, wait. What are we at?
I've got losses to Notre Dame and Michigan. So yeah, I'm at.
You have 4-2. I've got 3-3. Home against Indiana for the old brass spittoon.
This is homecoming. I think you can get a win here. I don't feel great about it, but
it's the only home game of October.
Yeah, I think they can. I think they'll win this game. It's homecoming. They're coming off a nice win on the road in Minnesota. Maybe confidence is high. Indiana loves to throw that ball around, so that's scary. But they lost Kevin Wilson got fired last year, and so they're under a new staff. And I think MSU gets that one. So 5-2. Okay, go ahead.
I say a win. I'm not as high in Indiana as other people are. They've really changed over the last 2 years. Tom Allen came in as a defensive coordinator and built up a pretty good, legit defense last year. And I think they'll be pretty good defensively again. But the offense really fell off last year, and now they have Mike DeBoer as the offensive coordinator. And actually, the running backs coach in that game is Mike Hart. And
that's right.
And the quarterbacks coach is former Michigan quarterback Nick Sheridan. So a lot of Michigan ties on that offense.
We're definitely winning that game. After that,
they're definitely going back to the early mid 2000s Michigan offense. I think Indiana. So I say MSU wins that game.
Yeah,
I have them at 4-3. You have them at 5-2.
Yep.
At Northwestern, who put up a Spartan Stadium road team record 54 points last year.
Yeah, they're going to lose that game. I think Northwestern's got a sneaky good team this year. On the road, it's a tough place to play, even though it's in basically a big high school stadium. I think MSU's got. I think they lose that one.
They still haven't tackled Justin Jackson.
No,
I don't know how they're going to do it another year later.
No,
I have them losing at Northwestern.
Yep.
Home against Penn State.
Do you want to just lump these next two together?
No, because when the land-grant trophy is on the line, you throw out the record books, even though the series has almost always been won by the favorite.
No way. Michigan State's got.
But
I look at
this game, this rivalry is what this is what college football is about. The passion, the energy, the hatred that comes with the land-grant trophy. You know that every time the team walks into the Scandalaris building and the trophy case is there, and they see that the land-grant trophy is not there, you can't say it doesn't put a little fire in their belly. So I say MSU will get plastered in this game.
Yeah. Nice build-up. MSU's going to get smoked.
I don't think Penn State. They were a very lucky team last year.
Absolutely.
In terms of big plays, yada, yada. But ain't nobody tackling Saquon Barkley.
No, you're not tackling Saquon Barkley, and all they do is go deep. James Franklin and D'Antonio have a kind of an underrated hatred for each other. I think that's a bit of a bloodbath.
And MSU does not have the guys who can defend the deep ball, so yes.
No.
Then at Ohio State,
that
returns just about everybody and finally adds an offensive coordinator who can really move the ball in former Indiana coach Kevin Wilson. I don't think this is much of a contest. MSU loses.
Yeah, same. I think Ohio State is one of the two top teams in the entire country, so I'm not picking MSU to do anything in that one.
So after a streak of 3 straight losses, I have them at 4-6. You have them at 5-5.
Yeah.
And they host Maryland on Senior Day, a Maryland team that went 6-6 last year, but didn't really beat anybody good and lost to all the good teams. But if MSU does not fake a 45-yard field goal with 2 seconds left on the clock, I think they win this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Michigan State Senior Day, coming off some tough losses, bowl eligibility hanging in the balance. I think they get the win here.
And lastly, at Rutgers.
Oh man!
And I think the worst thing you can say about Rutgers is that they lost like 42-0 or 45-0 to MSU last year.
Yeah, that's not a ringing endorsement of the program.
That said, the last time MSU did go to Rutgers, MSU went to the playoff, and Rutgers had to 4th down spike the ball because MSU couldn't.
I forgot about that.
MSU couldn't cover Leonte Carew.
Oh man,
who was no longer on the team.
I bet you Arjun Colhoun sees that guy in his nightmares.
And fun fact, offensive coordinator at Rutgers this year, Jerry Kill.
Really?
Former Minnesota head coach. He is back.
Oh, good for him.
Back in football.
I'm glad to see him healthy enough to coach, but I do not think this game will go well for him. I have a feeling they're going to be well out of it at this point and basically just hoping the season's over and looking forward to getting home for Thanksgiving. So I think MSU wins that one too.
So I have them at 6-6. You had 7-5.
Yep, that's what I've been saying all along. So I feel good about that.
Dom is not here to give his 12-0 prediction.
Thank God.
So we will just have to assume that is what Dom is doing. Dom, we love you.
That's what he's thinking for sure.
Man, those predictions did not turn out well that year.
No.
So that's that. So I have 6-6. You have 7-5. I could see them not making a bowl, but
I can see that
too. We'll see. Are they together enough at the end of the year to play well against Maryland and Rutgers, or do they have 7 losses by then and they're, affects the psyche or whatever. But this is a big year for everybody involved. I don't think D'Antonio is on any sort of hot seat as long as the program gets back on track off the field. D'Antonio has earned all sorts of patience on the field.
I agree. I don't think there's any question. I don't think he's on a hot seat, and anybody who says so he hasn't been around for the last 10 years, frankly. I think, like you said, it's more about off the field than on. I think if you evaluate this team, you see it's really young. If they can just get back to a bowl, keep things clean off the field, and get back to being that respectable program that everybody kind of looked up to for a really long time, I think his seat is just fine.
This is a transition year. They should be pretty good in 2018. They will also get Ohio State and Michigan at home and have 5 Big Ten home games next year.
Yep,
so
that's a big one.
The only problem is that Penn State and Michigan will also, I think, have big 2018s. We'll have rosters that set up well for 2018.
It's going to be tough in the Big Ten to line up a schedule that you're not going to play some heavy hitters. So all things,
especially in the East.
You take your shot and you just hope for the best. So
if this team misses the bowl, I think it is a pretty big step back for the program. I think that they'd be able to bounce back the next year. But if you go 2 straight years without a bowl, and this,
tough sell.
MSU's recruiting is not going as well as it had, and memories are short. And the playoff, the Rose Bowl, the bunch of wins over Michigan is in the rear view. It's always what you have to do next. So it will be an interesting year. I'm glad football is here. There will probably be a lot of growing pains with this MSU team. But unlike, I said at the beginning, this looked like a John L. Smith type of roster. I do think, though, there is more reason for hope than hope for the future compared to a lot of those John L. Smith rosters. By the way, I talked to John L. Smith for a story I'm writing for The Athletic. It may be up Thursday if you're listening to this Thursday. It's not about MSU. It's about what's it like to be an interim head coach and how things went for him terribly at Arkansas. But I got John L. on the phone. I did not ask him anything about
slapping himself
about MSU, but he was very happy to talk. He's coaching at Kentucky State right now. By the way, he's a head coach down there and happy about his team. So that's what good old John L's up to. Anything else you wanted to touch on here about this season?
No, I think you pretty much hit it. I'm excited. I'm actually excited to watch this team in a weird way. It reminds me of some old Michigan State teams where you're getting excited to watch these guys grow together and build something that hopefully can be special. So, a big win over the likes of, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, I think would mean even more this year than it has in years past. So you always want to be competing for championships, but I think if you take a realistic approach to this year, a 7-5 year would be pretty darn exciting. So
I think a 7-5 year is tremendous. Yeah. But then again, if they could go 1-11, but if that one win is the Land Grant Trophy, that means you had a good year. That's what this rivalry is all about.
Yep. I'm with you. So, let's get that land grant.
So I want to thank everybody for listening over the years. I have very much appreciated it. Some weeks we get many hundreds of listeners, some weeks not. I generally just did this podcast because I wanted a place to talk about it out loud with my voice, because most of my day is spent talking to dogs that are in my house. So I've appreciated all the different partners I've had doing this podcast. Joe, Tui, I think one of my favorite memories of this podcast is when Joe spent a summer living with Blake O'Neill, the Michigan punter who dropped the snap. That was a fun few weeks on this podcast. Joe would give us updates and everything on how Blake was doing. Dom and I did it for a little bit, and then Austin, you came aboard, and I didn't even realize that we already knew each other.
That's right.
We went to the same high school. Austin's a year older than me, but we went to the same high school, and he had been writing for the site for a while. Picture until we got up on the Google Hangout, and I was like, "Wait a minute, I think I know you." And I think I've enjoyed talking with you all the time. I think we've bounced off each other back and forth, especially when I talk over you. You're very knowledgeable and always prepared in these podcasts, which I always appreciate, because sometimes I wasn't. But you always you can tell listening that your passion for Michigan State sports is up there. And while it's too bad you won't be writing for the site anymore, I look forward to you continuing this podcast, which, guys, I believe should be on the same RSS. I'm going to hand this over to Austin. So hopefully you guys don't need to download anything new. It'll just, whenever he does it again, it'll pop up on the same RSS feed.
Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure.
And again, let me get more or less plug in. Again, if you are so inclined to subscribe to The Athletic, right now we have a deal. It's about $4 a month for a year-long subscription. A lot of great content that you're not getting anywhere else. It's kind of, I think, where the writing now. There are no ads on the site at all. No autoplay, none of that. It's super easy to read. That's the number one thing I could tell you about it. And you also get, for all the MSU folks here, a subscription to that does get you access to all the athletic sites, including the Athletic Detroit, which will be doing a bit of its own MSU coverage there, along with all the Detroit teams. So I would highly recommend it and hope you guys do it. You can do a month trial, I think, for $1. Take a look. I think it'll be worth it. I'm enjoying the work I'm doing, and I think we've got a good team of writers. So thank you for listening to me, Austin, now, before I interrupted you for the last time.
Yeah, Chris, well, it's been a pleasure, man. I've enjoyed our last year. Hopefully once in a while you could maybe drop in on us. But, yeah, I'm excited to move it forward and just hope to be able to live up to the standard that we've kind of established here. So thank you from all the TOC folks, and, best of luck. I know I'll be following you, so I hope everybody else continues to do the same.
And we have to finish this, as always, by reminding everybody, we always forgot to do it at the beginning of the podcast. I'm at Chris Vanini, still AC Smith 06.
Yes, sir. Still
as
there.
Well as the callers. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Catch me on the Twitters in the meantime, and I will, but Austin will talk to you till next time. Enjoy the football season.